Okay, so you're here because at some point you've probably stared at a tough problem and thought, man, I wish there was a picture to help me figure this out.
Right.
Well, today we're going to get to the bottom of that. Does adding a visual actually help us solve problems better?
We're diving deep into something called the multimedia effect in problem solving, which is basically the idea that when you have a problem, adding a picture can actually make you better at solving it.
And to unpack all of this, we've got a really cool study.
Yeah, I'm a meta-analysis.
It's called Multimedia Effect in Problem Solving, a meta-analysis from the Educational Psychology Review. What's really helpful about this is that it didn't just look at one or two studies. It combined the results from 51 different studies
51.
with data from almost 39,000 people.
That's a lot of people.
So it gives us a really strong sense of, what the science is actually saying here.
Right, a broad view.
So today our mission is to kind of sift through this huge study and try to pull out the most useful parts for you, the listener.
Yeah, like when do pictures really help us solve problems? And when do they maybe not matter so much?
Or maybe even make things harder.
Yeah, totally.
And there are some really interesting things we found. Like, it turns out that the type of picture you use is really, really
Oh,
important.
yeah, that's a big one.
Not all pictures are created equal.
Nope.
And another interesting thing is that how much more confident you feel in your answer when you see a picture is often a stronger effect than whether you actually got the answer right.
So the feeling of knowing versus actually knowing.
Exactly. Okay, so let's start by making sure we're all talking about the same thing. What do we even mean by the multimedia effect in problem solving?
So at its core, the idea is that people are better at solving problems when there's a picture alongside,
Mm.
or instead of just the words describing the problem.
Okay, so they can actually see it instead of just imagining it.
Exactly. And the types of problems included in this meta-analysis, they weren't just like, riddles or brain teasers. They looked at a whole range of problems, from multiple choice questions to word problems to problems that require kind of a flash of insight.
Like those aha moments.
Exactly. And also problems that involve making analogies, seeing how different situations are similar.
And all of these problems were studied in both like assessment contexts, like formal tests, and also in more casual learning situations.
Right. Different settings, different ways to apply these ideas.
Now, we're all pretty familiar with the idea of using pictures and videos to learn new things, but focusing specifically on how they affect our problem solving, it sounds like that's a little bit of a newer area of research.
Yeah, you're right. There's been a lot of research on how multimedia helps us learn in general, but how visuals specifically impact our ability to actually come up with solutions to solve problems. That's become a bigger focus more recently.
Okay, so it's kind of like a subset.
Exactly. And researchers have been testing this out in all kinds of subjects, like math, science, even language, to see how visuals change how well people solve problems.
And I bet they're finding that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Right?
Yeah, there have been mixed results, which is why this meta-analysis is so helpful. It pulls all of that data together to give us a clearer overall picture.
Okay, that makes sense. So when researchers are trying to figure out why a picture might be helpful for solving a problem, what kind of theories or frameworks are they using? Like, there's not a specific, theory of pictures and puzzles.
Right, there isn't a single specific theory for that. So researchers often adapt ideas from broader theories of multimedia learning.
They kind of borrow from other areas.
Exactly. So you have things like the cognitive theory of multimedia learning, which is sometimes called CTML.
CTO?
And then there's the cognitive affective theory of learning with multimedia, which is CTLM.
KTL.
And these theories basically argue that we process information through two main channels, one for words and sounds and another for images. So the idea is that when we use both of these channels together effectively, we process more information and we're better able to kind of build that mental model of the problem in our heads.
It's like using both sides of your brain.
Exactly. And then you have the integrated model of text and picture comprehension. And then there's cognitive load theory.
Cognitive load theory, okay.
This one's interesting because it looks at how much mental effort it takes to understand something. And the idea here is that visuals, if they're done well, can actually reduce that mental strain, freeing up our brains to focus on the actual problem-solving part.
I can see that, if you can see something instead of having to read a paragraph describing it.
Exactly. Think about trying to follow complicated instructions. A simple diagram could make it instantly clear what you need to do without having to read through a bunch of text.
That would definitely free up some mental space.
Absolutely. And then we should also consider theories of embodied and distributed cognition.
Okay, that sounds complicated.
Well, these theories basically say that our thinking isn't just limited to what's happening in our brains. It also involves our bodies and the things around us.
So it's like our environment is part of our thinking process.
Right. So in a way, visual aids can almost act as an extension of our thinking, helping us manage and work through information more effectively.
That's a really cool way to think about it.
It is, right. So it's important to keep in mind that most of these theories were originally developed to explain how we learn with multimedia. When we apply them to problem solving, we see that pictures can play a couple of important roles. First, just like in learning, they can help us actually understand the problem itself, like giving us a visual aid to interpret what the question is asking.
Okay, so they make the problem clearer.
Exactly. And second, pictures can help us find the solution by making information easier to remember and access. Pictures are often more memorable than words, and they give us that quick access to knowledge.
So it's like they're giving us a shortcut.
Exactly.
All right, so we've talked about the theoretical background. Let's get to the heart of it. What did this huge meta-analysis actually find about how pictures affect our ability to get the right answer?
Well, the overall finding is pretty clear. Adding pictures generally helps people solve problems more accurately.
Okay, so pictures are good.
Yeah, in general.
Yeah.
Now, across all the studies, the average effect size was 0.32.
0.32.
Think of that as a standardized way to measure how strong the effect is. So 0.32, that's a real improvement in accuracy. But it's not like a huge leap.
Okay, so it's a noticeable difference, but not a game changer.
Right. But here's where it gets really interesting. The type of picture matters a lot. The meta-analysis categorized pictures into 4 main types based on their purpose.
Okay, let's break those down.
So first you have decorative pictures.
Decorative pictures, all right.
These are basically just there to make the material look nicer.
Like adding a little visual flair.
Exactly. Like if you're reading a problem about apples, they might just add a picture of an apple tree in the background. It's not actually giving you any information about the problem, just making it look a little more interesting.
Okay, so it's decoration, not information.
Right. And interestingly, there wasn't enough research on decorative pictures in the studies they analyzed to really draw any strong conclusions. There was only one study that looked at this specifically, and it didn't find any impact on accuracy. So it seems like just adding a random picture for decoration probably doesn't help much with problem solving.
All right, so adding visual clutter might not be the best approach. What about pictures that actually show you what's happening in the problem? Like if the problem's about apples and oranges and the picture shows apples and oranges.
Right, you're talking about representational pictures.
Representational, okay.
And those did show a positive impact on accuracy. They had an average effect size of 0.24. So they do seem to help people understand and solve the problem better. However, there was one study that actually found a negative effect when students were given diagrams. The researchers thought maybe the diagrams actually prevented the students from forming their own mental pictures of the problem, which might have been more helpful.
Interesting. So sometimes too much visual aid can backfire.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
And when that one study was removed from the analysis, the average positive effect of representational pictures actually got a little bit stronger.
So it's like finding the right balance between providing visual support and encouraging people to think for themselves.
Right, exactly.
Okay, what about pictures that organize information, like a diagram showing how different concepts relate to each other, or a flowchart outlining the steps to solve a problem?
You're talking about organizational pictures.
Organizational, okay.
And those were actually the most effective. They had a pretty big effect size of 0.52.
0.52, that's pretty significant.
Right. The meta-analysis even highlighted a classic study that found these kinds of pictures could really help people transfer their understanding to new, similar problems.
So it's like they learn a strategy they can apply elsewhere.
Exactly. However, the key here is that people need to actually understand what the picture is showing. If they can't figure out the organization, it's not going to help and might even confuse them more.
Right, so a confusing diagram is worse than no diagram at all.
Exactly.
All right, so far we've got decorative pictures, which are basically just there to look nice, representational pictures, which show us what the problem's about, and organizational pictures, which help us structure the information. What about pictures that actually contain data or details you need to solve the problem, like a graph or a chart or a map?
Those are called informational pictures.
Informational.
And this is where the findings get a little murkier. Overall, the meta-analysis didn't find a significant average effect for informational pictures on accuracy.
Really? So even though they're giving you the information you need, they don't necessarily help?
It's not that straightforward. Many of the individual studies did show a positive trend, but the average effect size was only 0.12, which isn't statistically strong.
Okay, so the results are mixed.
Right. And there were even some studies that found informational pictures actually had a negative effect on accuracy.
Wow, so they actually hurt people's performance.
In some cases, yeah. The researchers suggested that being able to understand and use visual information, especially in subjects like math or science, requires specific skills. If you don't have those skills, the informational picture might not be helpful, or you might even misinterpret it.
So it's not just about providing the information, it's about making sure people can actually understand and use it.
Exactly.
Okay, what about using multiple pictures together, like maybe an organizational picture and a representational picture?
The meta-analysis didn't find a significant average effect for that either, but the few studies that looked at multiple pictures generally showed positive results.
Okay, so it's promising, but we need more research.
Right. And it's probably going to be a lot more complex than just saying more pictures equals better problem solving.
Right. It's probably going to depend on the specific pictures and how they work together. So the meta-analysis also looked at other things that might influence whether pictures help with accuracy. Were there any surprises there?
Yeah, it was actually pretty surprising how many things didn't seem to matter.
Like what?
Well, for example, it didn't matter if the problem was easy or difficult. Pictures seemed to help in both cases. It didn't matter where the study was done, or how many people participated, or the subject matter.
So it didn't matter if it was math or science or language or even medicine.
Right, the effect was pretty consistent. It also didn't matter whether the test was on paper or on a computer, or the age or education level of the participants.
Wow, that's a lot of things that didn't make a difference.
It is. It suggests that the basic benefit of pictures for accuracy might be pretty generalizable across different situations.
That's pretty cool. All right, so accuracy generally seems to improve with pictures,
Yeah.
but what about how quickly people solve problems?
This is where it gets more complicated. Overall, the meta-analysis didn't find a strong effect on how long it takes to solve a problem when pictures are involved.
Really? So they don't necessarily make us faster.
It's not clear. There was a lot of variation in the results from different studies. Some studies found pictures made people faster, some found they made them slower, and some found no difference at all.
So it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah. And there was some evidence that studies that didn't find a significant effect might have been less likely to be published.
Okay, so there might be some bias in the research.
It's possible.
So why is it so hard to figure out whether pictures make us faster or slower at solving problems?
Well, there are a couple of competing ideas. On the one hand, you have the idea that our brains can process visual and verbal information at the same time.
So the picture could help us understand the problem faster.
Right. Pictures can be grasped very quickly, so maybe they help us build that mental model of the problem more efficiently. But on the other hand, adding a picture also means there's more information to take in.
So it could actually slow us down.
Yeah, potentially. It might take longer to process the picture, or it might even be distracting.
Right, like if it's a really interesting picture but not actually that relevant to the problem.
Exactly.
So what did the meta-analysis find when it looked at the different types of pictures and their impact on response time?
Unfortunately, there weren't a lot of studies that looked at each type specifically. But for decorative pictures, there was some weak evidence suggesting that they might actually increase the time it takes to solve a problem.
So adding a pretty picture that's not relevant might actually be a bad idea.
Yeah, maybe. It might draw attention away from the important information. For representational pictures, there was a trend towards increasing response time, but those findings weren't always statistically significant. Organizational pictures were only looked at in one study, which showed a slight increase in response time, but again, not statistically significant. And for informational pictures, some studies actually suggested that they might reduce response time in some cases.
Okay, so maybe if the informational picture presents the information in a really clear and concise way, it can save you time.
Yeah, that's one possibility. But overall, it's still pretty unclear what the impact of pictures is on response time.
Okay, so accuracy generally goes up, but the effect on speed is complicated and depends on a lot of factors. Now let's move on to how people feel when they're solving problems with pictures. The meta-analysis looked at metacognition, specifically how confident people felt in their answers.
Right. And the findings here were pretty consistent. Adding pictures significantly increased how confident people felt about their answers. The average effect size was 0.74, which is pretty substantial.
0.74, wow, that's a big boost in confidence. Why do you think that is?
Researchers think pictures might just make the problem seem easier to understand. It's like if you can see it, it feels more manageable. And that feeling of ease or fluency then leads to higher confidence.
So it's not necessarily that you understand it better, it just feels easier, so you're more confident.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But the meta-analysis also included a word of caution about this increased confidence.
Okay, what's the catch?
Well, this increased confidence doesn't always mean people are actually more likely to get the right answer. They might just feel more confident, even if they're not actually any better at solving the problem. It's what's sometimes called a metacognitive illusion.
So you might be tricked into thinking you know more than you do.
Exactly. It's like when a presentation is really visually appealing, you might feel like you understand the topic really well, but then when you're tested on it, you realize you didn't actually absorb that much information.
That makes sense. It's like the visuals are creating a sense of false confidence.
Right. So while pictures can definitely boost our confidence, and that can be a good thing in terms of motivation, we shouldn't mistake that feeling for actual knowledge or accuracy.
It's a good reminder to be critical of our own understanding, even when things seem easy.
Absolutely.
Okay, so to recap, it seems like adding pictures generally improves accuracy and increases confidence, but the effect on how quickly we solve problems is still a bit of a mystery.
Exactly. We need more research to really understand what's going on there.
So for the listener who's trying to learn more effectively, what are the key takeaways from all of this?
I think the most important takeaway is that while multimedia can be really helpful, it's not a magic bullet. It really depends on the specific type of picture and how it's used. For anyone who wants to learn better and solve problems more effectively, remember that visuals can make you feel more confident, and that can be great for motivation. But don't assume that confidence means you actually understand it better.
Right, so don't be fooled by flashy visuals.
Exactly. And be critical of the pictures you see. Ask yourself, what is the purpose of this picture? Is it just decoration, or is it actually helping me understand the problem? Is it organizing the information in a helpful way, or is it giving me new information I need to know?
It's about being an active learner and thinking about how the visuals are supporting your understanding.
Right. And remember, different types of pictures seem to have different effects. Organizational pictures are really good at helping us see the structure of a problem, while informational pictures require us to have the skills to interpret them correctly.
That's a good point. A graph isn't helpful if you don't know how to read a graph.
Exactly.
So there's still a lot of unanswered questions about how pictures affect problem solving, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like, why do informational pictures sometimes not help or even hurt our performance? And how do pictures affect the time it takes us to solve problems? And how can we avoid those metacognitive illusions, those moments where we feel more confident than we should?
Right. There's a lot more research to be done. This study even briefly touched on this interesting idea of a cognitive theory of multimedia assessment,
Oh, yeah, that's a fascinating concept.
which suggests that when you really want to test someone's expertise, you might actually want to take away some of the visuals that help them learn.
It's kind of counterintuitive.
It is, right. Like you're making the assessment harder by removing the visuals.
Right. The idea is that if you want to see how deeply someone understands something, you need to force them to rely more on their own knowledge, not just the visual cues.
So it's like a more challenging test of their understanding.
Exactly. But as the meta-analysis pointed out, this is still a pretty new area of research, so there's a lot more to learn.
So to sum it up for the listener, adding pictures to problems can often make you more accurate and definitely more confident. But the type of picture really matters, and whether it makes you faster or slower at solving the problem is still up in the air. This deep dive has given you a really good overview of what we know so far, based on a ton of research.
Yeah, and now we want to leave you with a question to think about. How could you use visuals strategically in your own learning and work? And what kind of aha moments could that lead to? Think about times when you've used visuals while trying to solve a problem. Did they help you understand it better, find a solution faster, or just feel more confident?
We encourage you to experiment with different ways of using visuals. See what works best for you. And we'll be back soon with more deep dives into other fascinating topics.
See you next time.